position. You said that you'd always give me your honest advice and informed counsel. You have, when it's mattered most, behind closed doors in the Oval Office, you've always given it to me straight. And for that, I will always be grateful.
President Obama earlier today, always grateful, but still issuing that forcible goodbye to Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel. The former Vietnam War combat veteran was the first enlisted man to serve as defense secretary. He was also the only Republican on President Obama's national security team. The White House officials told NBC News Hagel was, quote, not up to the job. Hagel's resignation comes at a time of extraordinary foreign policy challenges and extraordinary political pressures. Rhode Island Congressman Jim Langevin is a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee, so he knows that side of this conversation very well. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Congressman, right off the bat, what's your reaction to Secretary Hagel being apparently forced out?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Secretary Hagel for his service. He is a Vietnam War veteran, distinguished member of the former member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, former United States Senator, and he did a good job as Secretary of Defense, brought in for a very different purpose than the challenges we're facing right now. Originally, he was brought in to wind down our presence in Afghanistan and also deal with the effects of sequestration and shrinking budget times. And clearly, challenges and issues have changed, and the president needs a different focus, and he's going to need someone with a different skill set. But I'm very grateful to Secretary Hagel for his service, and I thank him.
And, Representative, when you say clearly the times and the challenges have changed, does that essentially mean that America is now out of the mode of winding down its war? We're obviously hearing these reports that the administration is stepping away from drawing down in Afghanistan. Are we now a nation fully at war again?
Well, circumstances demand that we're going to need to be more aggressive in the Middle East. I share the President's commitment that that does not mean a large U.S. footprint. We're not going to be sending hundreds of thousands of U.S. soldiers to the Middle East, and I would oppose that even if that were the case at this point. But it does mean that the strategy needs to be more aggressive. We are now dealing with, obviously, the meltdown of the Syrian government, the rise of ISIL, which in many ways caught a lot of folks in the administration off guard. Now you're dealing with Ukraine and of course, Ebola. So there's a number of different things that were not present when Secretary Hagel was first brought on as Secretary of Defense. So our strategy in the Middle East is going to have to be more aggressive. And I think that means not only the President's current strategy of training the foreign fighters in Syria going after ISIL so that they can help degrade their capability and potential for further airstrikes, but it means working more aggressively with our allies, especially nations in the Middle East, and getting them to step up more and quite frankly, perhaps have them put their boots on the ground, since in many ways this affects nations in the Middle East more directly than it even does the United States. But
and of course,
the
those
focus
are
and the strategy will be more aggressive.
Exactly. So it's certainly becoming more aggressive, more so than many of the players in this conversation would like. You yourself will be a player in the conversation about a potential replacement as a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee. What is the committee looking for in that replacement?
Well, someone that's going to be able to adapt to the new strategy that's needed and come up with a cohesive plan and being able to advise the President and the security team about how best to combat ISIL, how best to deal with the Syria situation, making sure that our interests are protected and that we're working closely with our allies. So I know that there's a couple of names that have been mentioned, former Deputy Secretary of Defense Michelle Flournoy, as well as former Deputy Secretary of Defense Ash Carter, both of whom bring important skill sets to the table and would potentially be fine choices.
You want to make a little news on this program and pick one of those names? Would you support a Michelle Flournoy candidacy for this job?
I would certainly be enthusiastic about Michelle Flournoy and, again, the years of dedication and service that she's brought to the table. I think that she would be a good choice and be well received, I believe, by both sides of the aisle in Congress. But I know that the President has a tough job to consider the right person for that job. It's one of the most important in government, particularly as we're looking out for our men and women in uniform and making sure that they have all the tools and the resources they need to do their job and do it effectively. We have to continue, obviously, to work against sequestration. And so those will be significant challenges for the next Secretary of Defense.
Congressman Jim Langevin, those are challenges you and your committee face as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time.